Hey, Facebook family, happy Wednesday. Welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, Facebook Live at 5. Happy to have you here. A little late. Sorry about that. Had to do some house cleaning stuff, and so I'm here. And as I come on, would you guys share this on your timeline with your friends as I share it on my other timelines? Who's the first one here? Hey, Michael. Welcome. You're the first attendee. Hey, Sabrina. I appreciate you guys joining me. Kind of a lot going on today. Let's see, where am I going to start first? How about this? There's some, well, let me start with the Nipsy Hussel update. Many of you probably have already heard that the suspect is in custody and that the alleged female driver of the car involved in the shooting of Nipsy Hussel she turned herself in and then they let her go. She wasn't taken into custody now. They say that she's afraid, fearful. Don't know if she spoke to the officers. It sounds like she didn't give a statement. Maybe she wants to have some representation. I don't know. But if you're the getaway driver, oh shoot, forgot my mic. If you're the getaway driver, I thought that would automatically qualify for a charge, right? So I don't know what's going on. There's scant details. And listen, rightfully so. You know, we get so caught up, especially when it's someone who's high profile celebrity, if you will. We want details and we want them now. And sometimes it's really not best for the police. It's not in the best interest of the police. It's not in the best interest of the community, really, to start just willy-nilly talking about what's going on when facts are ongoing, developing, fluid. And I think that's kind of the problem right now over in Dallas, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But nonetheless, in the case of murder of Nipsy Hussel, Eric Holder is the suspect, and he is in custody. He was arrested on yesterday here in Bellflower, California. So there will probably be a lot more said, especially when he gets ready to go to court. So we'll talk more about that when that happens. But with regards to Dallas, all hell was breaking loose over there in Dallas. You know, the young lady, and I'm not even going to attempt to say her name, the young lady that was assaulted by the white guy. You've seen it. I'm going to share the link with you. But she was assaulted by the white guy. She went to pick up her phone to call for police help. He slapped it out of her hand and then savagely beat her. Well, I guess when she was interviewed by authorities, which you should never talk, especially without counsel. But anyway, when she was interviewed by authorities, she admitted to doing some damage to his car. And as a result of her admission, or I guess over there in Dallas, when you do the kind of damage that she did to his car after he beat her up, it's a felony. And so the police department over there charged this young woman whose last name is Lee. She has a very complicated, it looks complicated to me, first name, so I'm not going to even go there. I'm going to just call her Miss Lee. But nonetheless, she was charged with criminal mischief, a state felony, because the damage that was done to this guy's car was somewhere between $2,500 and couldn't have been $30,000. I guess in order for you to be charged with a felony, the cost of the damage can be anywhere between $2,500 and $30,000. And so the damage that she caused to this guy's car was somewhere in that range, thus qualifying for a felony charge. And so the police did do that. They charged her with this felony. And so of course, activists, went bananas over there, and the attorney representing Miss Lee went bananas. And there were threats of shutting down I guess they have a big arts festival every year, and this is the 5th year anniversary, and it was going to happen on April the 5th over in Deep Ellum, Texas. And so the protesters were threatening, if this woman was charged, Miss Lee, with causing chaos and havoc at this arts festival, and they were going to shut it down. So police charged, and the district attorney, once it got over there, said that they were not going to charge this woman, and so now she has the charges have been dropped against her. But I mean, I'm torn. I get that it's a felony. So did the police have any discretion? I don't know. I don't know, because they're sending the guy who beat her up so savagely. The prosecutors are sending him to a grand jury to let a grand jury decide what to do with him. His name is Mr. Sheffield, 30 years old. He was charged ultimately with something very minor, but then the police upgraded the charges to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and carrying a weapon. And so they're sending him to a grand jury. And like I said, then they charge this woman. So charges have been dropped. I don't know if that's the end of the story with her. Sounds like from reports she suffered significant injuries, and don't know what's going to happen ultimately with that. But I guess the arts festival gets to go on, Dallas. So yeah, have a good time April 5th over there with that arts festival. Next story that I wanted to talk to you about is police related, and this involves Black police officer. He's of Somali descent. I guess that's right. He's a Somalian over in Minneapolis. His name is Mohammed Noor. A few years ago, or a year or two ago, he shot and killed this Australian lady. And so now they're in the process of jury selection. And what's also kind of newsworthy about this trial is that the judge is restricting some of the evidence in the police shooting. They're restricting public access, or they're restricting media coverage of some of it because they say it's going to be too salacious, I guess, too prejudicial, or I don't know, too hot. I don't know why the judge is not wanting the media to be a part of this process. And of course, the representatives for the media are upset because they say it violates their constitutional right. They have a right and a duty to report what's going on. And so there's some back and forth that's occurring right now between this judge over there in the case of former officer Noor in Minneapolis in the shooting death of Justine Damon. And that was back in 2017, July 2017. And so just real quick, she had actually called the police. Justine had called the police. She thought there was a burglar, thought there was something going on outside. She went outside to meet the police, tell the police what she saw, and somehow she wound up being shot and killed. And as a result of that, this officer was fired and charged. Now listen, I'm for what's right, no matter the ethnicity, but it will be very interesting at the end of the day to see how this plays out, how this jury deals with Officer Noor, because he's Somalian. And we're going to see if, what justice looks like when you're a Black police officer accused of shooting and killing someone wrongly, unjustly, unnecessarily. Again, I'm for what's right, but we know that there's two systems, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a civilian or if you're a Black police officer. There are two systems, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's that. For those of you who don't know, my podcast dropped yesterday, Tuesday. Every Tuesday, new content, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. And you can subscribe and get probably notifications on the platform of your choice. Yesterday, I kind of went in detail about Tanya Chapman, little update on that fired Black female police chief over in Portsmouth, Virginia, first female. Well, she's been replaced. And so I'm not going to go into it here, but she's been replaced by an interim chief who happens to be a sister girl. Her name is Angela Green. And I have some very pointed opinions about, when they go to the, I'll just say when they go to the wood pile to, find somebody that looks like me, to replace somebody that looks like me. There's always one that, they can call on, right? And so, yeah, they have Angela Green right now over there as an interim police chief in Portsmouth, replacing Tanya Chapman. So if you want to know more about that, you're going to have to listen to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks on iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeart, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That dropped yesterday, and for my Facebook folks, there's a link on my timeline. For my YouTube subscribers, just slide on over to the podcast platform of your choice and check it out. Also, in the news, there was this guy who got into a neighbor dispute. This was in, where was this? I'll tell you where it was in just a minute. But he got into a neighbor dispute over an animal of some sort. And he called the Humane Society on his neighbor because of something. And this neighbor lost it. And and the neighbor said to the whoever it was that was citing him about whatever his infraction was with this dog, the neighbor said to the humane officer that, you know what, he just needs his ass kicked. And you know, that's probably what we'll do, is just kick his ass the next time we see him. I'm not laughing. I don't mean to be laughing. You know, sometimes it's not a nervous laugh. But anyway, it's not funny, because when this neighbor who got the citation, when he saw the guy who called, he shot and killed him. Thankfully, the victim was recording the encounter. So maybe the victim who saw this guy coming towards him knew that this was not going to be good. And so he started recording the whole situation, and it was recorded live, that, you know, the conversation that led up to the shooting, and the victim, take that back, the suspect, his name is James Hanlon, he's 53. The victim is Gary Dorsey, he's 63. And he was able to get the shooting on video, and ultimately this guy, the shooter, he went on the lam, and they were looking for him, and they found him. And so now the shooter is in custody. But you know, I talk all the time about, you know, what can happen. I hope you're still there. My computer looks like it's freezing. But what can happen when you get into a neighbor dispute over whatever? Because listen, you know, people feel some kind of way about animals, and you know, you get into it with your neighbor, you got to live there, they live there, and it's a problem. So I certainly don't advocate for, you know, that kind of discord, if you will, because you got to live there, you got to deal with these people. And now we have a situation where this man lost his life behind a confrontation over an animal. And you know, I know that I have some people that are on here who are dog lovers, and particularly, and I'm not mentioning no names, but when you hear this, classmate, I know you were having some angst with some neighbors who weren't properly caring for an animal. And you know, we kind of talked about this, about not getting involved into a pissing contest, if you will, with your neighbor over an animal because of this kind of thing. And so, you know, sometimes it's just better to let folks do what they do, and, you know, not get involved, because now this man lost his life. So something to think about, something to think about. Okay, let's see, what else is going on? How are you guys doing? Let me see what's going on here. Let me look out here in Facebook land and see who's here. Hey, Pamela, thanks for loving my laugh. Somebody asked me, am I suggesting that he'll be convicted and held up and be held accountable? I think, James, you're talking about Officer Noor. You know, my guess is, really, listen, right is right and wrong is wrong. My guess is that they will make an example of Officer Noor. And that's not really, let me be fair, because I don't think it's just because he's black. I think it's because he did something really stupid. Officer Noor, reached over his partner officer who was sitting in the car. Officer Noor, the way that it's reported, reached over his partner to fire shots over his partner, across his partner, and through the window to hit this lady. So, you know, when you do that kind of foolishness, then you are, you know, more than likely going to be held accountable, because no matter his color, had he done that, you know, as a supervisor, hearing what led up to the shooting of this woman, and she was not a threat. His partner didn't view her as a threat. The partner was closer to her in proximity than Officer Noor was, and the partner didn't fire a shot. I mean, Noor could have shot his partner. And then there's some other backstory behind this Officer Noor, because they kind of paint him, and I don't know if it's true, because they will dirty you up, but they kind of paint him as a police officer who was ill-suited, who had some issues and some problems, and it sounded like maybe they had written him up or counseled him on how he handled himself as a police officer. It sounds like maybe he didn't have the best judgment. Sounds like he wasn't really using common sense. And so that's why they fired him. Now, we're going to have to see what a jury of his peers over there in Minnesota think about all of that, because at the end of the day, it's up to the jury to decide. I think the jury will decide against this officer. Now, if they find him guilty, then the question becomes, what will be his penalty? Will it be something significant, or will he get, you know, the homie hookup, right? Will he get what Officer, what's his name? I can't say his name right now, but the Asian officer over in New York who shot and killed Akai Gurley, he got probation, you know? Will he get what Jason Van Dyke got, which is 6 years, and he'll probably do maybe 3 or 4? Will Officer Noor get that hookup? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But he's going to get something. He's going to get something, I believe. I think they are going to, I think they're going to make an example out of him. And, you know, he did something stupid. He was irresponsible, and you don't get to do that. So I'll let you know what happens with that. You know, I like it when I read, I'm constantly getting Google alerts about research and studies and complaints about law enforcement here, there, and everywhere. And it amazes me, but not really amazes me, how, you know, they're constantly doing research and study, and they're analyzing, and they're trying to figure this out and that out, as if we really need all this research to justify what Black folks say happens to us all the time, right? We know what goes on. And so now there's a research study that was just done, and this research study was at George Mason University. It was published in a journal over there for the Criminology and Public Policy Department, I guess. And this has to do with police body cameras and the effectiveness of them. And so these researchers got together, and they were looking at all sorts of things with regards to how effective are police body cameras. And they were saying in this research study, now listen, you know, for me, body cameras don't make a bit of difference, because we see officers on video all the time cutting up, and then people wonder, well, did they know they were being recorded? Officers get tunnel vision, and I don't think they care that they're being recorded, particularly when officers are being taught by way of no accountability, by way of no consequence, when officers are being shown that even when it's on video, nothing's going to happen to you. So why would body cameras make some significant difference in the way officers conduct themselves? They don't. But what one of the studies did find is that prosecutors are using the video cameras to help prosecute citizens. You know, they can get behind it when it comes to, well, look at here, look what the citizen did. But in terms of really changing the behavior of an officer, and then, you know, there's a lot of times when, you know, video isn't even available, or something happens outside of the purview of the lens, because officers know how to disable them, or they forget to cut them on, or they take the person out of range. You can hear, but you can't see. So, you know, police officers are crafty, and there's all kinds of ways around video. And then on those instances when the video is clear and crisp and we see everything from start to finish, and they find that, we feel the shooting should not happen, then we're told that the police officer said, "I thought he had a gun," as in the case of the officers who shot Stephon Clark up in Vallejo. They thought he had a gun, and that was sufficient because the prosecutor said, "I'm not going to prosecute you." There's video. Now there's video being released of the shooting of the young man in the drive-through restaurant at Taco Bell. We talked about this before. The video's been released, and it shows that the officers, it sounds like the officers pretty much, immediately upon contact started shooting into the car. So I don't know what's going to ultimately happen with that shooting up there in Vallejo, because listen, the problem that I have with that shooting is that the young man had a gun. And so, he didn't have the right to carry a gun. California is not an open carry state. So he did have a gun. And that's going to be problematic if it ever goes to trial, because a jury is not going to convict those officers when that young man had a gun. And that's why people get all upset and they say I'm victim blaming. I'm not victim blaming. I'm just telling you, based on my experience and training, based on the fact that I've had to review uses of force and make an adjudication about whether or not something was appropriate before it even gets to a jury. But understanding how juries side with police officers because they want to give us the benefit of the doubt, and they do. And so now this young man is gone. His family is left to deal with the aftermath. And I don't believe in Vallejo, based on some of the things that I hear about the kinds of shenanigans that are going on up there, I don't think a jury is going to find those officers at fault for shooting this young man. And so, then the question becomes, so what redress or how is this family made whole if they are? Because listen, not everybody who sues the police for wrongful death gets a settlement. That's something else to understand. And then, there's all kinds of other things that factor into the settlement situation, whether or not you're working and what you're worth and your value to society and your family and what you would have provided for them had you, lived to work and blah, 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 blah. And that's why you see sometimes, and then it depends on the lawyer too, right? Good lawyering, we know good lawyering will get you coin. So there are a lot of variables, but in the meantime, this person is gone, and we don't have the benefit of being able to talk to these people now that they're no longer here and ask them, hindsight being 20/20 because you're gone. But if you could have a conversation and ask them, would you do something differently, sir? Would you carry a gun knowing that police will kill you, have no problem shooting you, and then will dirty you up in the press, will make excuses about something that happened 2 days ago, a week ago in your life that somehow would make it seem like you didn't deserve to live, because that's what they did with Stephon Clark. They said that he'd gotten into an argument with his girlfriend over some domestic violence issues the day before, and that had nothing to do with nothing, but that's the narrative that's being put forth because they're dirtying him up. And this is what happens. And so, I wish we did have the benefit of asking some folks, would you do things differently? If you know that 10 seconds later, the police are going to shoot you and kill you, and then they're going to mitigate and minimize that deadly use of force. So anyway, we'll see what happens. But, that's why I'm being cautionary with you when I talk to you to tell you what not to do. Not that I guarantee if you do everything that I say that you will live. I can't guarantee that because I don't know the officer that's going to stop you. But what I do know, what I believe anyway, strongly, is that there are some things that if you do them, for sure, you greatly increase the chance of being shot by a police officer. And so that's why next week I'll be traveling to Sacramento. I will be going with some attorneys from the ACLU in Los Angeles, and I'll be going up to speak to legislators on this law that they are trying to pass. It was called something else last year, but this year it's It's being supported by the governor here in California, Gavin Newsom. He's calling for reforms in the criminal justice system. And this is as a direct result of the Stephon Clark shooting. And so there are some legislators that I'll be speaking to on next week with regards to when officers can use deadly force here in California. So the way it works right now is California state law allows officers to use deadly force when they have a reasonable fear of being harmed. Now, having a reasonable fear of harm is subjective, because what's reasonable to me may not be reasonable to you, right? But nonetheless, they're trying to change the wording from reasonable fear to allowing an officer to use deadly force only when it's necessary to prevent imminent or serious injury or death. And this law would then require officers to also de-escalate whenever possible. It's a good first step, but the de-escalate whenever possible, that's problematic terminology for me. And only when necessary is kind of same, because to be honest with you, I think any good street cop could articulate why they felt it was necessary and why they felt it was reasonable. But being able to take that first step and get the language change and require officers to de-escalate, because it almost sounds like it's not something that's across the board required de-escalation. I mean, on LAPD, we certainly are required to do that, but I don't think that's uniform. And so I'll be speaking to legislators next week, and I'll let you know how that goes. And let's see. Oh, listen, there's another something else. You know, I've heard about this, and I've had some conversations on some shows where I've been interviewed about this. I did kind of like a PSA with regards to women, or anybody, but women particularly, who use Uber. I know it's a big thing in certain parts of LA, particularly on the west side where traffic is bad, and you know, those who live on the west side may be frequenting Hollywood or whatever, and you don't want to drive your own car because parking is a problem. So ladies, be very careful about Uber and Lyfts and any other ride share service. Make sure that, you know, they do have designations that are in the window that says either Uber or Lyft, and make sure that you see that in a car before you get in it. Now, there was a lady in Columbia, South Carolina, who was killed by a man when she jumped into his car thinking that he was an Uber rider, and then once she jumped into the car, he immediately activated the door locks and the child restraint, the child controls. So once she was in the car, she couldn't open the door in the back. So he wound up taking her somewhere and killing her, and that was in South Carolina. So they got this guy, he's in custody. He's been charged in the death of this young woman when she was 21 years old. But nonetheless, you know, you have to be careful, and you have to be mindful of the kind of cars you get in. I know sometimes people, you know, use those services because they've been drinking. And so you want to be sure that, you know, they give you the license plate. They don't give you the license plate for nothing. They don't give you the description, the picture, and all of that for nothing. So the first time you see a silver Prius pull up, just because you're Uber drivers in a silver Prius don't mean you need to get in that one, ladies. So be very careful, be mindful, be careful. I want to talk just real quickly about this whole, this is kind of a political story right now. You know, there's a young lady who's seeking whistleblower protection. She is part of the White House, and she was reporting problems that they were having with the security clearance. And you guys know what's been going on with little Tink Tink, and you know, he's passing out security clearances up there like he's playing a hand a bit whist or something. And so this lady who works in that office has reported the shenanigans that were going on, and so now they're coming after her. And the reason that I mention this is because, again, this kind of dovetails on my whole situation with LAUSD, and I'm not going to go into that again, so don't leave. But whistleblower protection, just know that even though there's a term, whistleblower protection is not a real thing. And just know that if you decide to report someone, that you got to be prepared to white knuckle and hold on, because in the beginning, and maybe forever, you may not get that protection. You may not be guarded. They may come after you. They may retaliate against you, even though there's so-called laws that are not, that should not allow that. And so here's a chick working in the White House who's a whistleblower, who's reporting that, you know, shenanigans are going on up there, and she still has her job, but she was suspended for 2 weeks, and she's been testifying before Congress. She testified last week or over the weekend, I think before the committee that Elijah Cummings is the chairman of, and I forget which one, Intelligence, I don't know. But anyway, she testified about what was going on and what has happened to her as a result of it. And so, you know, even in the White House, for those who work around the White House, no such thing as whistleblower protection. I'm not saying don't tell. I'm just saying when you do, be prepared, because you may have to go it alone. You may not have the kind of protection, immediate protection anyway, that you think, even if they have placards and posters saying exactly what whistleblower protection looks like. If it's on their website, you know, if it's in the handbook manual, just understand that, yeah, it's not a real thing. It looks good on paper, but it's not a real thing. So be careful and know that you may have to go it alone for a little bit. So anyway, that's it, you guys. Just wanted to give you that little bit of an update. And oh, hey, oh, James, you met me at the what was that? Was that Dick and Sharon's West Coast Forum where we met? I appreciate you finding me here and hanging out with me on a Wednesday. And I hope you'll tell a friend and share this on your timeline so that some of your Facebook family can enjoy my perspective the same way you do. I really appreciate that. So listen, you guys, that's it for this week. Unless something happens earth-shattering, we won't do this again until after I come back from Sacramento. And so when I do, I'll let you know. In the meantime, be sure, if you have a chance, or set your DVR on the BET network, Finding Justice, the docuseries that's been airing over the last couple of weeks. I think this might be week 4 or 5 episode. It's called Police Brutality. I will be in it. Don't know how much of my interview that I did with the producers is gonna, you know, make it, but I'll be seeing it for the first time along with you. I did have a little cameo last week on the episode that had to deal with LAUSD and school police, you know, not only here in LA, but also, you know, just around the nation, and how heavy-handed police officers are on campus with our students. And, you know, I told you about that police officer in another state who was found to be a recruiter for an alt-right organization, and he was working in a middle school. So listen, we know that this stuff goes on, and, you know, they try to pretend like they don't have any idea. And I'm saying they, the, you know, school board members here in LA and other places, put these officers on campus with our students, and you know, they really shouldn't be, because they don't have the temperament to deal with, you know, bratty, smart mouth little kids and those who misbehave. And so it's a real easy way to get kids into the system, because you just get one school resource officer who says a child did a thing, grabs them, throws them around, and then, you know, inserts them into the system under the guise of, you know, they didn't cooperate or whatever they come up with. So that was last week's episode, Finding Justice. And this Sunday, BET Network, Police Brutality is the episode that will be airing. And then the following week, I think that's the last episode, and that one deals with, I think it's the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, I believe. But anyway, check it out. And I think they did a really good job with the way that everything was edited, and with the information that's being provided. It's coming from a variety of sources. There are activists, there are police experts like me, and others, Black Lives Matter folks. So a lot of different perspectives, and I'm really curious to see what this week's episode, Police Brutality, is going to look like. So until next week, you guys, thanks for joining me. Be sure to stop by my website, www.sgtcheryldorsey.com. Subscribe and follow me on YouTube, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks. Subscribe to my podcast, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, on the podcast platform of your choice. And next week, I'll see you back here on Facebook. So until next week, you guys, be good, be safe.